Welcome back to the Vibe, where we talk to lay people about what's really going on in technology. And I have like one of the most exciting guests I think I've ever had on any of our shows right now. I started to dive into AI when ChatGPT launched. I don't have a technical background, but I've always known that it's a global conversation, and it's hard to get that global conversation without a lot of politics involved. This is timely because Trump is in China right now, but
Hmm.
Jeff Towson has the Tech Strategy podcast. This guy is hands down the expert on what's going on in China and robotics and AI, and all without the without any political bias from is what I've really appreciated. So Jeff, give us your signature hello, and tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I live in Asia, mostly China, but I travel a lot. Been here about 17 years on the ground in China, and was studying tech companies a long time ago, before anyone cared. Nobody cared back in 2010. We didn't even really have smartphones in China in 2010. And then it became kind of a big subject business-wise. Oh, lots of consumers. Wow, biggest car market in the world. Then it became very political, starting around 2016. Now it's become kind of a digital story, which is interesting, which is, I don't know, left me a little bit in the center of things, I suppose. And yeah, Trump and Elon and all them, they're arriving in Beijing today. I think they've probably landed already. So that'll be the story for the next, I don't know, how long do stories last these days? 48 hours? Something like that.
That's about right. And I checked in with ChatGPT right before we talked because the news yesterday was that Jensen was not going to be present, but according to ChatGPT, he's been added last minute.
He's on the thing in his leather jacket. I saw a funny photo go around a couple minutes ago. It was Jensen preparing for his trip, and there was a room full of leather jackets. I'm sorry, you can't wear leather jackets at that age. Like, you got to know where you are in life. Like, no man that age should wear leather. It just doesn't look, no, you can't pull it off. Even a billionaire, you can't pull it off. Sorry. Put on a suit.
He's
So,
a character, that's for sure. A lot
yeah.
less than controversial, I think, than the Elon Sam Altman thing, but he's definitely they've all got their personalities.
Jensen is actually, I listen to the China angle, obviously, and he's pretty much on the nose. Him and Elon are actually pretty much on the nose because they operate in Asia, in China for a long time. So, they're talking from experience, which is actually not that common. Not that many people do business out in China, really. So, from the West. So, they tend to be a little bit, yeah, they're talking from experience. So, they're usually pretty on the mark in my experience. My opinion, let's call it.
That's a really good place to start because I have agreed with you and disagree with Dario Amodei, and now we're starting to see Huawei. In my opinion, if you rob somebody of innovation, that's gonna encourage them to innovate better. And so this whole idea of not allowing China to use NVIDIA chips, we're now seeing, and I just heard in your last podcast that Huawei has the Ascend chip and is starting to proliferate Chinese technology and catch up. So let's just talk about the whole chip war idea and where who Huawei is, because a lot of my audience are not going to know who JD Logistics are or
Yeah, yeah.
Baidu or any Tencent, any of these companies.
Yeah, I've been writing about Huawei from about 2012. And, they were a very private company. They didn't usually meet with anyone. They never did interviews up until the entity list ban back in, I'm going to get the date wrong. Is it 2018, 19? Um, and they were on the verge, like they were a telco maker, right? Manufacturer. Then they moved upstream into R&D and started becoming, developing the tech themselves over 20 years. Then they moved into consumer business, mostly smartphones and some other things. They passed Ericsson, the leader in telco, in about 2010. They were on the verge of being the largest smartphone maker in the world 2 months before the entity list ban came down. So anyways, I ended up going out like 2 months after they got the hit. And I went out to their campus. And I was literally sitting behind the chairman. Like, I have a picture of the back of his head. Um, and I was sitting behind him. And they went out and just talked about their financials, what's happened, which is actually kind of strange because they're private. They don't have to tell anybody anything. But they actually do release their revenue every 6 months usually. They basic numbers, R&D, op profits, things like that. And they just talked about what they were doing. And anyone who knew this company, it was clear what was going to happen. Like, it was so obvious. Like, look, you cut them off from, it wasn't just chips, they hit their whole supply chain, you know. But the two big, they called it like the machine gun shooting through the plane, right? And, lots of holes in their supply chain, telco and consumer business. But the two big holes that went through the engine, that's their language, was the operating system for their smartphones and high-end semiconductors, which you need for smartphones. They rejiggered their supply chain over a year. For the telco side, that was relatively easy. Not easy, but easier, because you could use lower end chips and things like that. But the big question was like, how are they going to close the gap on operating system and semiconductors? And the operating system, the problem is not writing an operating system. That's pretty straightforward. The problem is getting adoption. How do you get the world to use this? And nobody has done that. It's a duopoly since 2012-ish. It's Android and it's iOS. It's a global duopoly. And really, by market share, it's 90% Android. How do you get the world to do this? And not really got an answer to that question. People don't want to buy a Huawei smartphone in London if you can't download YouTube, Facebook, and all these other companies, right? Well, that problem got solved in a couple years. In China now, there's not a big difference between a smartphone in China now versus then, because you couldn't get YouTube and Facebook and any of those anyways. The Google mobile store wasn't available there anyways. So, their operating system, HarmonyOS, they've been getting pretty good traction in China, and they've probably got critical mass as an ecosystem. That wasn't a surprise. The timing was the question. The one that I think surprised people is about a year and a half ago, well, almost, yeah, a year and a half ago, when they released their trifold phone, and it looked like it had high-end semiconductors in it. This was the trifold, the 3, which is awesome, by the way. It's totally awesome. It's super thin. It's 3 screens. Like, it's ridiculous how good their handsets are. And everyone couldn't figure out how they did it. Like, and even I know the people there pretty well, and I even asked them, how did this happen? But we didn't know. We read about it in the newspaper like you did. So that was the question. Are you making 7 nanometer chips, 5 nanometer chips? Are you doing it at scale? Are you doing it where you're making money, or this you just spending a huge amount of money so it's not cost effective? That was sort of step one. That it happened much faster than everyone thought. And now they're right on the edge. And then the GPU, the switch from CPUs to GPUs, that was really kind of opened the market up for them, because the tech changed. You had a bit more of a window. And I mean, I guarantee you, like, this is going to be the year it happens. Like, watch for 2 things to happen in the next 6 months. They will continue to go global, China, in low-cost open weight models. DeepSeek, right? DeepSeek V4 just dropped. Everyone is adopting those everywhere because they're so cheap and they're good, right? Silicon Valley, people are using these to build their startups because it's 90%, 95% cheaper. So you pair super low-cost open weight models. DeepSeek, Qwen has some, Kimmy's got some. You pair that with sort of low-cost infrastructure, data centers. And the data centers are what? That's Huawei's CloudMatrix, their Ascend chips. Once those get standardized and you can drop those 2 things together, then you can do AI anywhere, pretty cheap. And the CloudMatrix, which is the Huawei big data center based on Ascend chips because they can't get an NVIDIA, they sort of rolled that out in November. They're going large sort of distribution second half of this year. So you'll see those data centers everywhere in China, probably Asia. Beyond that, we'll see. But that combination is going to freak people out, because suddenly you're going to have a Chinese tech standard completely independent of the U.S.
And that's
Don't
going
need
to,
them at all. That'll be a big political probably thing.
the soft power value of that, I think, is what Americans don't realize. Even if the United States pushes back and says, we don't trust Chinese technology no matter what. Like the rest of the globe having access to these open source models is going to offer China a lot of soft influence in South America and Africa, all the way around the globe.
Yeah, but I mean, they're open source and they're downloadable.
Yeah.
It's not like they're controlling them. They're downloadable. You download it on your laptop. It's open source. You can see, I'm not open. I mean, it's open weight. You can see the weights. You know, what kind of control does that give? No, it's, um,
If you know what you're looking
I mean, you have to know what you're doing, but it's a pretty good counter strategy to this idea of AI in the world is going to be controlled as a proprietary system running out of Palo Alto. Well, we've already seen the penchant for US companies, I'm an American, to politically weaponize those things at the drop of a hat. You
Yeah.
can get cut out of the banking system, you can get censored on the internet, you can get cut off from your supply chain. Like, let's call it a more controllable, downloadable version is not a bad thing to have out in the world. But then it kicks into the political discussion, and then I don't know how I feel about that, to tell you the truth. I've coming to the conclusion I think it's kind of evil, like a little bit. Like the rhetoric right here coming out of, say, Washington D.C., but really a lot of press in the U.S. is, um, we have to stop China from using this technology.
Yeah.
I'm like, you understand this is a general purpose technology, right? This is like electricity. You want to cut off a huge portion of the world's population from electricity because you think it makes them strong versus you? Like, that's kind of evil. Are we going to cut off water next? I mean, come on, I get the argument, but I'm sort of coming around to this. 100 years ago, the U.S. did not discover electricity. What didn't really discover it, didn't deploy electricity at scale and then aggressively withhold electricity from big parts of the planet because they saw them as rivals.
No, I think
I think we're tipping into something that's really, this is what we're doing.
the one
So
flip
I don't
side
know
of
how
that
I
coin
feel
I
about
would
it.
say I would may say it's more like nuclear in the sense that it can be used as energy or power, but it can also be weaponized to an extensive amount. If you look at the ability to hack systems and some of the unlocks that AI offers on the offensive side, I think is where people are somewhat trepid about its misuse.
Yeah, I don't. I think I wouldn't put it as nuclear power. I'd put it closer to electricity. Like, you go to Kenya. I like going to Kenya. You can't get great doctors in a big portion of that country. You can in Nairobi and Mombasa, but not out in the villages. They all use ChatGPT when they have when they're in pain at 2 a.m. What's going on with my daughter? She's, really? You're going to cut that off from people? Really? Like, no, I would put it as a general use technology. Like, this is really, a great blessing for the world. And you're just going to cut people off from it? Really strip them of their chips? So, anyways, that's a little bit of a political. I don't have a strong opinion on that. I'm kind of just thinking out loud.
No,
If something about that strikes me as inappropriate.
no,
But
I get that, and I do the difference in views. So I cannot remember the name of the book, but there's a book out that was written by a gentleman who was raised in Hong Kong, then lived in Canada, now back in China, and he talks about, I think it's Breakneck. He talks about the fact that China as a whole, like even their parliament is full of engineers, whereas
yeah, that's a
America, we're
comment.
full of attorneys, right? And so maybe you could dive just a little bit into the different mentality, whether it comes to building nuclear power plants, like how rapidly China is doing that, where here we just regulate everything to death. Where do you see their advantage there, and where could we tend to learn a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, these systems are so complicated. I mean, China's as complicated as the US. How many general things can we say about the US that are true? Like, the weakness people have, the common, let's say, problem is they look at China and they immediately go to a political lens because that's, oh, what is Beijing doing? Really? If you're looking at restaurants in the South or, a lot of this AI stuff, it just bubbles up from everywhere. You wouldn't look at the U.S. and say, "Well, what do we think about this technology?" Well, what does Trump think? I mean, we don't go to political leaders first to understand most things. It's far more complicated, and they don't know mostly. So, I mean, it's just a massively complicated country, and you got to kind of look at it at a very granular level. You want to understand, like restaurants in China, spend a lot of time and take apart the restaurant sector and take apart F&B. And then you got to look at Shanghai versus Guangzhou, and that's different. Consumers are different, incomes are different, behaviors are like, it's really complicated. So it's hard to, make these comparisons in general. I always tell people, like, look at the sector level. Start looking at sectors, and we could look at coal plants in China versus the US. We could look at renewable in China and the US, and we could get some pretty good distinctions. But the whole country, it's kind of too big for that now, unfortunately. It's,
Well, let's
it's,
just dive into nuclear. They are moving a lot faster than we are they
yeah, it's
not?
not really my sector. I don't know
Okay.
the nuclear. I would say on something like that, what China's very good at, and this could be a superpower, I suppose. The government. I mean, people always. I'm ranting now. People always kind of talk about, well, democratic versus autocratic, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's a dimension. Um, the other dimension that I care more about is smart versus dumb. I will take a smart autocratic country over a dumb democratic one every day of the week, right? So the Chinese government, in many ways, is exceptionally smart. They're very effective when not 100%, but when they do certain things, they're incredibly effective. When they choose to deploy infrastructure at scale, let's build 200 airports. You come back in a couple of years, 5 years, 200 airports have been built under budget, right? Well done. That's not that common in the world. And you can do that so when it's deploying infrastructure, they're very good. Real estate, roads, bridges, um, data centers, although China doesn't have that many data centers, really. Everyone thinks they do. They're about 1/10 of the US. So, but data centers, things like that, power, water facilities, water treatment plants, very good at that stuff because for multiple reasons. Smart. They've been doing it for 30 years. They've been building infrastructure since 1980 on a daily basis. You're going to get good at something if you build roads and cities for 30. You're going to be real good at it. U.S. used to be good at this. In 1920, the U.S. could build buildings and roads like it was nothing. Well, don't do that much of it anymore. And then they also have certain levers the U.S. doesn't have, which is they have the state-owned banks, so they can extend usually credit that is never paid back to local government vehicles that can then do these things. So when the government chooses to pull levers, the money flows, it goes into construction, and the buildings go up. So that they're very good at. Infrastructure at scale, physical infrastructure. Now, when you talk about people and AI, there aren't really any levers to pull for that. You need some tax breaks, but people always say, oh, China has an AI strategy. I'm like, there's no levers to pull on that one. They encourage it. They give tax breaks. They give training credits and things like that. They might set apart a part of town like Zhongguancun in the northwest of Beijing, you can rent places really cheap, and they will let startups use that. They might do a real estate sort of, but they don't really have a strategy. They sort of encourage it, and then it bubbles up from the ground. And then if there's a winner like DeepSeek, they will then maybe support them a bit. But it's sort of bottom up. Infrastructure's top down, brain powered AI software. Most of that's bottom up generally.
And they
So
are
it's
producing a lot of scientists, a lot of engineers. I mean, that's an insane a number of, compared to the
that's
United States.
that's one of my favorite factoids. Like when they say, "Oh, we're gonna cut off their chips. We're gonna cut off their DRAM now. We're gonna do all this stuff." I'm like, you understand they graduate 2 million engineers a year, right? You understand that. What do you think these people are gonna do? They're gonna get in a room and they're gonna figure it out. Like they're really smart, and you got a lot of them. The U.S. graduates like 150,000. It's like an 8 to 9 times multiple. I'm like, you can't really stop that, right? this is just technology at the end of the day. The inputs are quite basic. So it's just a bunch of smart people sitting in a room. Well, Huawei's got 204,000 people working there. So
Yeah, and the
this idea that
HB1
you can
beta thing is
stop
weird.
innovation is, I just don't think it can be done. I think they're going to figure it out. May take
Yeah,
a couple years.
I don't disagree, and one of the things that with this administration I have totally disagreed with is the restraints on the HB1 visas and actually bringing that talent over here and incentivizing that. I think we should definitely be more than open to engineers from around the world coming to the United States to help us build our technology.
I don't know. I don't. You could say one thing. Hey, we only graduate 150,000 engineers per year. That number's not exactly right, but it's pretty close.
Sure.
Let's bring in a bunch of people from India and China. It's mostly India. I'm like, I know a lot of smart Americans who want a job. And if you want more engineers, train them. That's what China does. They don't import talent. They build schools. They built an enormous amount of universities between 2000 and 2010. So they train their own people, which the U.S. seems to take the easier solution. Let's just import people. Silicon Valley used to be 75% American. Now it's 25% American, 75% foreign. You
That's a
know,
great point, Jeff. That's a great
I
and
don't, I think the days of doing that are maybe, I think people are pushing back on this idea that if you're an American citizen and you grow up and you go to school and you work hard and pay your taxes, you have to compete with the whole rest of the world to get a job in your own country. I think people are starting to argue maybe that's not quite great. Um, but anyways, I don't have any real strong opinions on that. That's just sort of where my own brain has been shifting over the last couple months as I listen to this stuff. Um, but
well,
anyways,
that's very pragmatic, and we're gonna go down some rabbit holes, but when you talk about how China is so good at building infrastructure, the one person that comes to mind in America for me is Elon, and how quickly he whipped up Colossus, and it almost appears as though Elon has decided to shift from trying to win the foundation model race with Grok to becoming a hyperscaler and competing with Jensen. I just wonder what your perspective on that is.
yeah, that's really interesting. Like he moves around a lot. He's like the most respected person in China. They take polls of like who is the most respected person, and it used to be Warren Buffett forever, and now it's Elon. So people have gone from wanting to be financiers and investors to builders, which is good if you got a country with a lot of engineers. And he's got his plants for Tesla outside of Shanghai. Yeah, I don't always understand why he does the things he does. Um, like, I don't think he thinks like an investor at all. I tend to think like, my impression is he starts with the end, which is what is the product that's going to be the best and that's going to win? Okay, we'll need AI in that. Fine, you have Grok XAI. Does this work better or worse if we build our own hardware that is more customized to this versus if we take sort of a modular approach? Now, Tesla, he did an integrated approach. Everything in that car, they built it. Now they have some batteries, but generally speaking, he didn't do this sort of modular approach which is how, ironically, how Tesla, I think, started. It was modular. We'll buy the tires from there, we'll buy the batteries from you, we'll buy that, and we'll put it together in a modular approach. That doesn't usually work real well with a new technology without an established design. And so for Tesla, and BYD is the same, they do pretty much all the parts themselves. They vertically integrated. And he's doing that for Optimus as well. So I often wonder when he's moving from AI into more data centers and Colossus and being an infrastructure player in his own right, you know, is that a business opportunity or is he sort of thinking from the end, like, look, to win this thing, the way we'll get better performance is by tightly integrating our infrastructure and our models. It would be an integrated approach. I'm not sure which he's doing. Um, I suspect that's it. I think that's kind of how he starts, but I don't know. Yeah, but now they're leasing up out. They're leasing out part of Colossus to Anthropic, right? As of
Yeah,
last week,
all of
that was
Colossus 1.
interesting.
All of Colossus 1, which totally alleviates the inference problem that Anthropic has had at its 80% profit growth rate.
Yeah,
And some are saying is going to allow Anthropic to win the race for the foundation models. I think people get a little ahead of themselves, but
I mean, it looks like he's still competing on the AI front.
yeah,
But I mean, maybe that's his thing. Maybe you build one, you build two, then you lease out one and you use the money from one to build three. But I think the money's so much bigger that probably doesn't work. Yeah, I didn't quite understand what he's doing with his data centers. It's a very different approach. If you look at his data centers, like Stargate is we're going to put data centers everywhere.
right.
And if you look at Microsoft, which is doing a lot of data, I mean, they already have an existing global network of data centers, and now they're transitioning them over to GPUs and AI, some of them. And then they've got some new ones that are specific for GPU. They're everywhere. And Huawei's kind of doing the same thing because they argue that, you have the massive data centers in China. There's three of them. And then they have smaller ones that are near the cities
Yeah.
because as you get into more rapid inference, you got to be close by. You can't control drones unless you have, tiny latency. Elon's not doing that. He built one massive center in one place, right? I don't know anyone who did it that way. So I don't know quite why he's doing that. I'm sure they've worked out the math. There's a plan there. But yeah, it's a very different approach to building data centers than what everybody. Or at
The
least
argument I think
geographically, it's different.
The argument in the press is that if you get all Blackwells or all of the same, at least company made in
Yeah,
one place, you're more likely to reach artificial general intelligence or super intelligence
first.
if they're all that close together. And then the big some people in America, I can tell you from watching the press here, are just think that Elon is so pissed off at Sam Altman that everything he does right now is to try to destroy OpenAI. And then I don't know how much of that backstory to like Elon being kind of
Yeah,
the
yeah, I
rich
know the
funder of OpenAI and then not being chosen as the board chair and there being a rift there for a long time that's now in court. But that drama, Americans love drama. That's why I would argue Trump
that
is
court
probably our
case.
president.
The funny thing about that court case, I've been reading the thing, Brockman and Altman. I'm like, remember when Mark Zuckerberg used to be seen as sort of sketchy?
Uh-huh.
Like, no one trusted Mark. These two guys are making him look trustworthy. Like,
Yeah.
suddenly he seems like not that bad. Like,
Yeah.
they're resetting the bar. And it's like, I mean, I'm only reading the transcripts, but oh my
There there was
God.
a there was a
Like, wow,
text like
really?
There was a text like 24 hours ago between Brockman and Elon where Elon was like, "Do you want to try to settle this thing?" And Brockman said, "What do you have in mind?" And Elon said, "By the time we're done, America is going to hate you and Sam more than they hate anyone on this globe."
Yeah, I don't know. It's really, I mean, I do have an opinion on this a bit. Like, there's this argument that, like, um, there can't be censorship, free speech, and that was Elon's thing. X is going to be free speech. Okay, that doesn't really exist. That lasts for about a half hour until people start posting the most horrific stuff you've ever seen. Right? No, it's the way I've always seen it is these platforms. It's like being the editor. I mean, in all aspects of society where information matters, we trust somebody. You know, when you have a newspaper, a local town newspaper used to be a thing. You have the editor in chief. Everyone knew who that was. That's the person who sets the rules. This is the stories that we're going to print today. These are the stories that are not. That's reach. This goes on the front page. That goes. So we trust the editor in chief to make those decisions. And then you go down to the church and you have a pastor, and the pastor sets certain rules on values, like we don't swear. When you come to church, please dress nicely. Those are values judgments as opposed to content judgment. And then we have a mayor who we know who's down the street, and they make decisions like, we have curfew, we don't litter, they make judgments on behavior. So content, behavior, and values, we always have somebody we trust. That's how we make those, because there's no algorithm that's going to get you there. There's no set of rules that are going to get you there. If you don't have rules, you're going to get pornography and all the most horrific stuff you've ever seen in media. And you're going to get terrible behavior, and you're going to get doxing, and you're going to get all this. And even apart from the terrible stuff, you're not going to be promoting values that we think should be promoted like a church would. This is who we should be. All of those three roles, if you run Twitter, you have to be that person for all three. Like, I don't know what the algorithm is for Twitter, but I know I kind of trust Elon to make the decision. That's just it. So when he says you're not allowed to dox people, he's you got to trust the person. Okay. Does anyone trust Sam Altman? Anybody?
Yeah.
Like, what about Mark Zuckerberg? Well, I used to think no, but better than the current crew. So, these, we used to have anchormen on the TV, right? That we trusted to tell us the news. We have the editor, we have the priest or rabbi down the street, we have the mayor. We had those people that we trusted to make those difficult decisions on and all they get. I mean, if you're Elon and you're running Twitter, you are mayor, you are the priest promoting certain values and not others, and you are the editor in chief, putting certain things. One, you're not allowed to do any of this. And then two, we're going to highlight these stories and not those. He's doing all three roles in one shot. So who the person is matters a tremendous amount.
Well, and I would argue Dario's leaning into that hard. I mean, he wants to be the
I
trustworthy.
think that's true. I think they're kind of woke over there. Like you test their woke stuff, they trigger. But I like that he sort of did the military thing and walked away.
Yeah,
I thought that was impressive. I mean, I've
I
been
agree.
joking about this for years. Like people say, "Oh, you're using Chinese social media," and it's like, you know what? If I have to choose between Facebook making the decisions and China, you know what China promotes on social media? Family values. Take care of your parents, respect your elders, study hard. I'm sorry, if I go on Instagram, I don't see anything like that. I see, and that's a joke. I don't know if I'd actually choose one, but I kind of feel more comfortable with that one than the Palo Alto gang in a lot of cases. So, but these judgments are super important. Um, and
One
who the
step.
person is matters. So I don't
This
buy this whole we're going to build some amazing algorithm and we're going to be free. No, I think it's the person.
this is
Show me
where
who it is. Get on Joe Rogan and talk for 3 hours, and I'll see how I feel about you. Yeah,
my concern. This you're bringing up something with my concern with America. Not I used to say American youth, but America as a whole versus Asia. And then you can tell me if my perspective is off. But I feel like when it comes to technology, the Asian culture looks at it more as a tool for creation, and we look at it as a tool for consumption. And that's why that's why we promote. That's why you can trend most on social media by upsetting people. Like we're such
yeah,
a be entertained, be in your emotions, and that's what the algorithm rewards in the United States. Whereas, hell, I remember it was not too long ago when that first half marathon was held in China with the robots, right? That was like 2 years ago, and at the same time, like so Italian brain rot was trending in the United States with AI, like which is like ridiculous cartoons of people saying stupid stuff. It was like the difference in the creator and and consumer uh, whole in these two areas concerns me going forward.
yeah. I think it's the founder, the guy who created WeChat, Alan Zhang. He gave a talk several years ago, and he made a good point. He said, our reality is based on the information that comes into our brains. The vast majority of the information we consume now comes from smartphones, not from walking down the street, not from going to church, not from the information flows that go into your brain from your smartphone shapes you. And it shapes your view of reality. It shapes your view of history. I mean, you can basically invent reality for people if you control these things. And that's kind of a lot of power. And so his question was, who controls the information flows? Does anyone actually do it thoughtfully? Or is it just an algorithm that's been optimized for consumption? Right? That's like saying I've got a supermarket. I want to optimize my supermarket for consumption. If I do that, I'm going to change 80% of my supermarket to be beer, chips, candy bars. And bread and cheese don't need that at all, right? Because that's how you make their money. If you go into typical 7-Eleven, well, not in Asia, but in the US, you're going to see candy and big sodas and energy drinks. Okay, that's a system optimized for consumption. Is that good for you? Um, so who controls these things? Is it a malicious actor? That could happen. Is it a state directed or other sort of actor? And I think they are absolutely, and there's a lot of power in this, right? Let's not, this is not just a business question. And there's a lot of power in these things. So those people who live in that world, they want to control these things. Or is no one thinking about this at all? And it's just crazy, and we're all getting shaped by something somewhere between stupid and harmful. Um, yeah, I think I've sort of changed my mind on this a lot in the last couple of years. I think I am far more shaped by the information I'm exposed to than I used to think I am. I think it's almost an unstoppable process. If you change my algorithm feed, you can probably put me in a bad mood in about 30 minutes. If you had control of it, you could feed me certain stories subtly and probably trigger me into a bad mood. And I don't think there's anything I could do to stop it if I was looking at that screen. So I'm much more curating the information I take in now than I used to, because I think it's almost like I'm coming. There's a quote I heard the other day. Um, you are you are either programming or being programmed.
Yeah.
There's nothing in between. I think our view of the world and our mentality and how we feel and all that, I think it is actively programmed more than I used to think it is. And um, that worries me a bit because it means I'm more pliable than I thought I was.
Well, and it's
So I'm really
difficult.
stripping it out now. I'm trying to put blinders on. I read a lot. I do a lot of stuff reading books with a pen and paper now.
It's
Um,
difficult. I mean, I'm a very audio, so I listen to a lot of podcasts, but and I diversify if I'm really interested in something like AI. I will listen to everything from the next wave, which is like super woke, to the All In podcast, to China Tech, like you. But I try to diversify my information, but to do that with everything would be exhausting, right? So it's not easy to do that.
there's another argument, which I don't know if it's true or not. That your brain works differently depending on the technology you use. That reading books trains your brain in a different way. It trains you to be sort of a solitary thinker. It trains you to have sort of longer term focus. It trains you to seek out experts and listen to them. Now, if you hang out on social media, that's network brain. Very different. Everything's quick. You're getting lots of different inputs from other people very rapidly. It's the difference between, like, if I ask you a question, um, what should I do about this cut on my foot? The people who have the book brain, they will seek out an expert or they will try to figure it out on their own. The network brain, their solution, everything is just posted online to their network. What do you think? And they'll get the answer that way. Both of those can work. So I think the technology, I feel like over time, I feel like social media has dulled my brain. I feel like I'm not as sharp as I used to be when I would just read all the time and write. And I write with a pen and paper. I think I was sharper. I notice it now. So I'm going back to that. I think
It's
video,
interesting.
especially. I think video is sort of low quality information, low
Yeah.
depth, let's call it, shallow.
I could see that. I've never really been a consumer of social media, I'll be honest. I love podcasts. I'll watch a documentary. But I always irritated my friends because I've used social media for marketing, whether in behavioral health or anywhere else for the last decade. And a lot of my friends will be like, "Hey, did you see what I posted?" And I'm like, "No, I don't consume social media. I just use it as a free marketing tool." LinkedIn would be maybe the exception to that. There are some things that I follow there. Twitter, I love Elon too, but I mean, Twitter went just as far right as it was left. So I don't really see it as an in between free speech platform the way it was kind of proposed.
Yeah, I think I like his argument that this thing should be truth seeking. I think that's the right approach. Just get to the truth of things. And, an AI built on that, I will trust. Now, Twitter's not an AI, Twitter's something else. So I do like where he's ended on that. I think he has a scientist view of reality. And really, these tools, they shape your reality. I mean,
They do.
if we delete something from Grok and Gemini from history, it's gone.
Yeah.
It disappears. I mean, you can really create reality for people now, and that's you know, get physical books. like like we all got to start building libraries again. We all need
Some
to
of us don't
start,
like to read. I've never liked to read, and I still don't.
but
It's
we
just
need a
not.
record of what used to be true, because if everyone's just going for they can change books now, the digital versions, they'll edit them. They'll change
Yeah,
certain storylines they don't think are appropriate. If you don't have the physical book, how do you find the real thing?
well,
Try
but
and get the original version of Star Wars.
okay, but does that alleviate it? Because let's study what happened to Native Americans when we populated North America in an American classroom book versus a German classroom book. I bet you're going to get two completely different stories. Just because it's
Yeah.
written in pen and paper doesn't mean it's the single source of truth.
No, it doesn't mean it's a single source of truth, but I think it's less prone to manipulation. Very hard to republish a book. You can change content coming through Gemini in any day of the week. There's a reason people haven't tried to control information by aggressively editing printed books.
That's
But
very true.
now there's a very easy mechanism for controlling information. So people are doing it because it's possible now. Um,
That's
so,
a great point. Let's talk about the information flow in the other way. So this is another thing that I saw, but just 2 years ago, there was a lot of consultants in America who were trying to essentially sell custom GPTs as executive assistants. And what I tried to bring up was, listen, unless you're going to use ambient listening devices day in and day out, it will not have the appropriate context. That's like trying to promote the secretary from Mad Men to chief strategy officer just because she knows a little bit about what's going on in the company. And so we're just starting to see these glasses and the pens and stuff coming about here. And I have a feeling there's going to be a huge privacy pushback in the United States. What does that look like in Asia? I have a feeling that they embrace that. China may be forced to, but even Japan, I have a feeling they might be more willing to give up some of their privacy in the name of efficiency and technological advance than Americans are.
yeah, it's hard to say. Um, Let me put a caveat on what I just said. I was thinking as you were talking.
No, no, go
I
ahead.
just said, like, people weren't trying to aggressively curate reality because it was harder to do in books than it is now. What if that's not true? What if it's always been going on?
Yeah.
We just weren't aware of it because it was happening behind the scenes. Like, what if all those books over the last 100 years have been aggressively curated to shape people's thinking and we just didn't know that game was happening? And now we're aware the game's happening. So maybe, I don't know. I was thinking
Well, that
about
would
the
be
other day.
there would be many who would argue that with the Bible, right? With all the different translations and editions that have come out over time with the Bible, that it's been slightly altered to and curated to the next generation. But
So maybe it's
I,
always been the way it is. Maybe it's just faster and more powerful now.
yeah, very true.
So we're aware of it. Um, yeah, the AI assistant thing, I mean, these things start, there's a lot of hype, a lot of tried things. Some things stick, some things don't. Remember when Alexa, what we were going to order by talking to Alexa? "Oh,
Yeah,
Alexa, get me some ketchup." And it orders it and delivers. Oh, okay, it never happened because turns out people don't like ordering by voice. Um, VR was going to be big forever. And then it turns out people don't like the iPad strapped to their face. Didn't take. So we don't totally know, but I think you can look at certain use cases. Obviously, coding's huge, video generation's huge, image generation is huge, especially on the business side. AI assistants. Have we seen any really big? I used like Annie in X for a while. I found that the little companion within
yep.
Grok. I actually liked that. I would use it in the car, and I still use it anytime I feel like I don't understand something. Like I was trying to understand, lithium batteries versus other types of batteries today, and it's out of my area. I'll keep a list of subjects like that. And when I'm in the car, I will ask them, explain this to me. And you'll get like a little lecture. You'll get like a school lecture on this is why this lithium battery works and why they've switched over to carbide or whatever. So I use it almost like a mini professor on the go when I've got like an hour in traffic. I find that great. I use that all the time. I like the fact that it's kind of this cute anime girl who's like, that's kind of makes it a little better. Um, So some of those are good, but is anyone using these things on a daily basis yet?
I mean, I do. I have for 2 years. I record the
What do
majority
you
of my
use it for? Yeah.
I will record the majority of my day, upload those audios to Notebook LM on a weekly basis, and then have Claude mine that, give me a prompt to say what have I done, what am I working on, where what did I say I was going to do that I didn't do, what are my deliverables, and then I continuously up that to update a project in Claude that is basically my executive assistant that I use if I'm hyper focused on anything, whether it's in the podcast that I have or the work that I do or side work, like that's all kind of collaborated there. And then I'll have it also ask like exactly what work did I do this week as it relates to Citizen AI, the company that I work for, or as it relates to my podcast. And I have projects for each of those that are more hyper focused on that work there, and
Hmm.
it doesn't get convoluted. So almost a mixture of experts versus a hybrid attention model of using projects, which I was just talking about the difference between those two before you and I got on with Chat GPT, the way you have Annie explain things to you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I work with someone every day, so we talk every day to keep things, moving, right? That it's the process, right? Go, 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 go. But yeah, I could see that makes sense to use it as sort of an assistant that way. Yeah, I might try that. I don't, now the privacy question, I didn't answer your question. There's always this sort of standard thing. Oh, Chinese care less about privacy than the Americans. Um, I'm not sure that's true, to tell you the truth. There's actually, there's a lot of privacy rules on the books in China, but privacy, there's a couple levels. There's people, there's businesses, and then there's the government, and then there's the party, which is kind of right into the, okay, there's not a lot of privacy up here, but there's rules between businesses and um, people. I think maybe the benefit here that China has is, we have these massive ecosystems of Tencent, Alibaba. So you get a tremendous amount of consumer data within these walled gardens. So their AI are getting very, very smart because you're not doing one thing. Like Uber does one thing for you, DoorDash does another. No, they have like 20 services you're using from them. So they're getting including your payment, they're getting a tremendous amount of high quality data about you all the time. I mean, China's kind of data rich on the consumer side. I suspect that's going to help them with their AI assistants and these utility things that they're doing. Um, that part's interesting, but do Chinese citizens care less about privacy? Well, one, it's not clear to me that Americans do at all. I know certain people say they do. Um, when you look at the numbers, it's not clear to me that's true. Um, I think Europeans do. Whenever
Yeah.
I give a talk in Europe, like that, I can count the seconds until that question comes up. Like, yeah, we're talking about these, AI systems to run cities and cars, and immediately hands go, what about privacy? Like, it's almost immediate. Um, so it's probably somewhat less if I had to guess, but I don't think it's that different really. I just think the data flows are, um, I would say that maybe this is a guess. The difference is the data flows in China about people are upfront and people know, oh, you're on this ecosystem, it's all going. The data flows on Americans are behind the curtain, but I assume they're happening. I assume data brokers are just having a good old time, but
So
I don't know.
transparency breeds trust. I mean that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, but I don't know. It's the whole privacy thing. It's like, what if this doesn't really exist?
Yeah.
Like people talk about it. It's like one of those things everyone talks about it. I'm not outside of medical information. I'm not sure I've ever seen it.
I don't
Like it just
disagree with you.
seems like just gets
Well,
blown away every time.
let me take it from a little bit different angle. So the facial recognition software, which we're using here,
Oh,
I have
that's a
been
good point. Yeah.
Purdue University uses this. watching your face to see to in order to control drones, right? They will actually put all this different things that watches the eyes of the person that's trying to control the drone. It monitors their brain waves. It can kind of see how much capacity they have because their vision right now is rather than three people controlling one drone is one person controlling 100 drones. And I've seen that in the classroom in China in some news for students, like as so that we can identify which students are really focused, which students need more attention. When I see that type of technology being talked about in America, it's, oh, you're just going to pick on other kids more. You're invading their privacy. Like it's a completely different. It's always a
Yeah,
pushback, not how will this move us forward.
yeah. The once I will criticize the U.S. when it comes in these discussions because I'm American, and I figure it's okay. But people always say, "Oh, you're criticizing the U.S." It's like, no, I'm just a voice that's able to do that in China. The description I've always heard is there's hard America and there's soft America. There's certain parts of America that remind me of China a lot. Driven, super smart, ambitious, building the future. We're going to have to work 7 days a week. Not a problem. We're going to work 24 hours. Not a problem. We're going into the mine. We're going to frack the hell out of this place. Like, there's a certain point of the U.S. I call it hard America. Like those people I like. We're going to the moon. Then we're going to Mars. Like, yeah, awesome, awesome. And then there's like soft America, which I don't really identify with as well. It's like, well, we got to work on the self-esteem, and we got to work. I'm like, I'm in the wrong room, my friend. This is not my world. You know, you need a beach to be stormed. I'm your man. But if you want to talk about how people are feeling, it's not me. There's other people to do that. So soft America, a lot of these stories, I sort of put them in that bucket. Now, is that 50%? Is it 80%? Is it 20%? I don't know. But there definitely seems to be two different mentalities. Um, and I identify strongly with one and the other not. I don't think I understand it terribly well. And I don't think I'm terribly interested. Like when Elon says he sleeps on his floor
Yeah.
in his office, I totally get it. I'm like, awesome. Good job. Like that guy's impressive. But when, Facebook says one of their core values is safety. Safety? Really? Like, my name, how many people died in the building of the United States over 200 years? Like how many coal miners and railroad guys, and not even mentioning those guys that got in the boats and went across the ocean in a wooden boat. Like safety? Really? It's like, that's not the history books I read myself, but okay.
I do
So,
not disagree with you at all, Jeff. And this is where, when we get into conversations like universal basic income and what's the future of work, my guess is in the next decade that, and I would say that the ones you're defining as hard are about 30% of the United States. That
yeah.
30% plus AI will be able to run this country, and we're going to have to figure out what to do with the other 70%.
Yeah, maybe that could be about right. And now to some extent, I'm sympathetic. Like, I spent a lot of time in Thailand, Southeast Asia, and and I spent a lot of time in France. So those are kind of my two go-to spots when I need to relax. I go to Southeast Asia, or I go to France. In neither place do you meet people like I just described too often, and I don't begrudge them that. Like, oh, we're having a really nice life. We got beautiful beaches, and like, Thailand's never going to be a superpower. Like, this argument that we're going to enjoy life and have a more relaxed life, it's nothing, it's totally fine. Like, it makes sense. If you were hard charging in France, you'd probably get pretty frustrated pretty quick. Um, can't fire anybody, really? No. So, this mentality is not appropriate for everybody. It's really not. And I
It's
think
not,
there's room for others to do things a different way. Now, if you
but
put both groups in the same country, you could have some problems, which maybe is
well,
the U.S. Um,
yeah, because in those countries, you also have like a healthier diet. You have some other healthy. I mean, I think if you were to just take that laid back approach in the United States, you end up with kind of a Wall-E or idiocracy type of environment where people are playing video games, watching porn, and eating junk food. Is a poss I- is a it's a possibility, and
well, that would
unfortunately,
be.
that's the
I
possibility.
don't see that in Asia very much. What I see is
Yeah,
people. I see a lot of people who spend most of their time with their family.
yeah.
That's what I see. They're not starting companies. They've got a regular job. It's a good job. They're going home at 4 to 5, and they spend all their time with their families. Grandma lives down the street. Grandpa lives down the street. You know, that's where the focus is. Like, now there's degenerate behavior as well, but I would say, if you're pushing time into that, I think that's great. Um, but if it's all people watching porn and playing video games and drinking soda, okay, that's not good. Yeah, the universal basic income thing, like this is a really interesting question, which I don't know much about. If people aren't stressed and driven and forced to do things, does that make them unhappy? I'm not convinced human beings are built to be happy. In fact, I think if we lay around, I think we make ourselves unhappy. At least I do, very quickly. But even though I'm struggling with something, I feel content in my mind that I'm struggling. If you take away all my burden, I think I'd be unhappy. I think I'd start getting into fights with people and causing trouble and creating issues in my head. I'm not convinced we are built for that. Like,
We're both sci-fi guys. I really think that Blade Runner kind of had the idea of if you devalue things, black markets are going to spring up, right? Like if money's not the thing, then you're going to live in a more of a dystopian type society where people are always going to seek what they can't get in a capitalist based market. And so I think, to me, if we move towards everyone not having to work all the time, we are going to have to create new industries around how do we make people more centered on and give them ambitions towards things that are fruitful for not only themselves but their families and society.
well, Warren Buffett always says, like, envy makes the world go round. Like, it's not love, it's envy. We're driven as a species by envy of others. That's why we're so productive, because we see what others have and we want it. And then, he has a big house. Now I have a big house. And he gets a bigger house. Now I want a bigger house. That's how this species moves forward, is by envy, which is, not healthy, but that may be hardwired. I don't know.
It may
I,
be.
I, I know that I'm happy when I'm working hard and when I have burden on me. And if you give me 2 weeks alone, I'll start getting into, just to chill out. I'll start getting into fights with people in about 5 days.
Yeah,
And I'll start having stupid ideas in my head. And I didn't like that my brother said this. I'm going to go tell him. I get these dumb things happening in my head. Like, I don't do well.
I would
Some
agree,
people do.
unless
I
I'm
don't.
steered. I mean, I've studied Buddhism since I was about 14. If I'm steered towards that alone time and that like centralized focus on deeper contemplation and metaphysics, then I can thrive without a whole lot of strain. But
Yeah, I buy that.
it,
I think
just
that's
in
right.
general.
I spent a lot of time working in Saudi Arabia many years. Everyone there prays 5 times a day. Well, not everyone, but they're supposed to. I think that's real great. I think it balances people out. It's a form of contemplation and, meditation somewhat. And I think that's a major, it's a very healthy thing. So I always kind of respected them for that. But yeah, maybe everyone needs that sort of meditative resetting. I don't know. Out
I
of my
love.
area, I do the China tech stuff, so
I
I'm
know.
on the
That's what I want
fringes
to
of
get
my
back because
knowledge.
while we still have a little bit of time, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about robotics. Like, tell us about what's going on in China with robotics because I know they've made some major advances.
Yeah, the everyone's waiting for the you got the manufacturing. There's really three stories. You have the manufacturing story, you have the AI story, and you have the ecosystem story. And they're all kind of advancing. The manufacturing story is okay, 40+% of the world's manufacturing comes from China. It's unbelievable the scale of this, the supply chains. And it's not just the manufacturing capacity there. It's all the inputs that they've been building from around the world. They get timber from Brazil. They get iron ore from Ecuador. They've built the global supply chains to feed the manufacturing hub of China, which then sells its products to the world. That thing took 30 years to build. And when it goes after a new technology with a bit of an open playing field, it's very impressive. That's EVs, right? Like there weren't Chinese automakers 5 years ago anyone talked about, and now they dominate EVs. I mean, BYD's amazing. These companies are amazing. Well, so you got the manufacturing story, and you can see the manufacturing story play out all the play in refrigerators, most people's smartphones, all of it, right? Okay, they are focused on robotics in a massive way, huge. This is a countrywide focus. And when you actually look at, let's say, a humanoid robot and you break it down by parts, most of those parts are from China already, the actuators and all that stuff. It's when you actually look where they're sourced by country. Now, there's some from Japan and Korea, but it's mostly China, and then it's those other two countries. That's most of the story. And there's a big overlap between that and the supply chains for EVs, the batteries, the motors, things like that. So you've already got a supply chain somewhat in place. So that sort of like robotic um, story, manufacturing story, it's rocking and rolling. It's, I mean, it's crazy. Um, I told this story before. Like I've been to Unitree 3 times in the last year, going to Galbot in Beijing next week. And when I went to Unitree about literally 1 year ago in Hangzhou, they have it's nothing of a building. You'd think it's a massive company. No, it's like a regular standard industrial building. And they had their first humanoid, which is small, and it couldn't do anything. It could walk, and you have to you program it and you trigger the programs, right?
Right.
It could shake your hand badly. That's all it could do. You go look at Unitree robots now, they can do kung fu. They can do kung fu at like Jet Li speed. They can do backflips in I mean, that's 1 year. The dexterity and the agility of these things is accelerating like crazy. They can outrun humans now by speed. And if you put wheels on the thing, it's a rocket ship going down the road, up the stairs, down the snowy hill, across the river. It's crazy. So the manufacturing story, I expect Chinese companies to just take the world by storm, just like we saw with EVs. Then we move to kind of the AI story, because the big move is one of these days we're going to put the AI in the robot, right?
Yes.
Embodied intelligence, physical AI. Um, I think that's further away than people think it is. I mean, China has it, right? They're the only country that has manufacturing in AI at scale. No one else has both. The US is going to build manufacturing, but they're kind of far behind. Okay, the AI thing, like the way I view it is, okay, you had, generative AI with text, then to image, then to video. But then we move out of this controlled environment of the internet and we go into the real world. Everything is so much more complicated. The models are different. World models are completely different. VLA models are completely different. Well, I mean, they're still based on transformers, but I think that gap from generative AI to agent AI to embodied AI, I think this gap is pretty big, actually. So I'm not thinking that's going to happen like this year, but the AI story is moving, and we'll see. Is it going to be Elon? He's got
Have you
Optimus,
have you
maybe.
seen what Thinking Machines Labs just dropped with persistent reactive interaction? It's pretty interesting. So Mir Murati, it was the CTO of OpenAI, started Thinking Machines Labs. They
Yeah,
they have just released a model that like micro. That's two models actually. One in the background that's continuously doing stuff, and then one that is interacting with the world through vision, voice, everything, and is micro processing so that in real time it's interacting with you. At least according to their demos. It
yeah,
seems like a step change towards what you're talking about.
yeah. I mean, it's funny because you try and predict this stuff, and we keep getting these surprises. Like, Sea Dance drops. Wow, I can make a Hollywood movie now. I couldn't do that last month. I can make an Avengers movie now on my phone for nothing. Like, it's just like a shock. It's like, could never do that before, and now apparently on Tuesday I can. And we had it with generative AI. Oh, now I can write books on with this thing. Now I can use it as a lawyer. Now I can write code with. Like we keep getting these surprises where it's crazy, it seems too far, and then one day it's here, and you're like, wow. So I think the next one, I have a prediction. I think the next one is going to be. I think someone's going to do music generation at like high level, like Beatles quality, like because video generation was kind of sketchy and it was fine. And then suddenly like C Dance hits and it's like, dude, this is Hollywood level. I can make a Hollywood movie now. I think we're going to get a music one where it's like, I can write songs like Paul McCartney now. Like, I think we're going to have that one soon because I've been playing with it and it's pretty close. But yeah, the next one would be like, okay, apparently embodied AI is a thing let's say in your apartment. Right? You can't, look, the street's too complicated, but here's a humanoid that can do everything in your condo. Can pick up the laundry, it can wash the things, it can work the kitchen, it can do the TV. But just one random Tuesday, it's going to be real.
Yeah, and I have a
Maybe it'll be
co-host.
next. I don't know.
I have a co-host for another podcast that I used to argue, like, because in the United States we talk a lot about elderly care and using these humanoid robots for elders who are lonely. And my initial thought was like that generation is not going to want a humanoid robot taking care of them. But she brought up there's a lot of things where like bathing you or cleaning you up after you have had an accident. Like there are a lot of dehumanizing areas where a humanoid robot would be highly preferred by most people over another human being having to do those things for you. And that may be a really great entryway into healthcare is the things that you would rather not have to have somebody else do for you.
Yeah, I don't buy these arguments of like, oh, no one would ever want to. Now, there's regulations in healthcare, so that's going to stop that for a long time. But I wouldn't when people say, oh, no one's going to ever want a AI girlfriend. Are you sure?
Yeah. Oh no, the sex industry will be huge. I'm sure
I'm pretty
it,
sure
it
that's going
is
to
in
go off.
every industry.
Yeah. So, and like, oh, they'd never have a friend who's an AI. Really? Like, nothing would surprise me. So, I'm open to, I'm open to anything really, you know, because,
When you
oh, but
talk
they're
about
not as
rough
good
stuff,
as humans. Well, I've had some idiot friends, like, like,
yeah,
I
they're
mean,
not as argumentative
what
as
is
you
the
might fear.
benchmark here? Because I've had some friends who were total morons in my life, and we hung out, and they were idiots. And I'll take a smart robot for a dumb human. So
I
yeah, but what's the standard? I'm open to anything. I'm open to real changes in human behavior. Uh,
I do not disagree. I joke, but only halfway joke with some of my friends. There's a lot of 50-year-old men out there who, if they had an embodied wife that didn't argue with them about how to do everything, would hop on that in a second. So there's definitely a market. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but there would be a market. But I just want to double click on the left hook, like the out of nowhere. I keep waiting for Jan LeCun or Feifei Li or one of these world model people who are so
yeah,
quiet to
I've
come
been
to just
watching her.
drop
I'm
some.
waiting. I'm like everyone. I'm waiting.
Uh,
Like, come on,
yeah,
Feifei. Everyone thinks you're gonna do it. You started it. You're ready. You're moving. Like, she dropped her first model, didn't she?
I think she did. But when
Like
you say
recently.
everyone, that's like only everyone in the tech world because the rest of the world has no idea who the hell Feifei Li is. Like in
Yeah.
general, the general people who know who Sam Altman is, they don't know who Feifei Li is. They don't know who Jan LeCun is or
Yeah.
Ilyas Hetzkever or half of these like brilliant scientists that are working on some stuff behind the curtain.
I think one of the things people really don't appreciate, like two things. One, how big the manufacturing ecosystem of China truly is. It's stunning. If you go to cities and the factories go on forever and all they make are tables. Like this whole city just makes tables and this city and the advanced level of this stuff. That's like the scale of that is the other. The other is the scale of the brain power. Like, they can deploy 20,000 really awesome engineers in a week if they have a good idea. The US can't deploy 20,000 people in a week,
Yeah.
right? And so when you get these ideas, if you get a good idea, they can flood people at an idea. The scale of the brain power is really impressive. Now, the U.S. gets there because, we bring in international, and maybe that might be an argument against what I said earlier. Look, the only way the U.S. can compete is with scale. We need 1 million PhDs in the United States, more than a million, like 100 million PhDs. And I mean, it may be a game of scale, and we don't have enough domestic brain power to compete with a China or in theory in India. Like, okay, I might buy that argument. Um, but the scale of the brain power. So if something happens and these world models start to work, um, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see it take off. But I look the manufacturing story. It's easy to sort of see where it's going and where we are. The AI story, I have a bit of a question mark on the rate of development because of the transition. The other bit is the ecosystem story, which is on the consumer facing side, although you could see on the industrial side as well. You don't need super powerful models within a super advanced robot. What you need is lots of, let's say, models and devices that all work together.
Yeah.
Xiaomi is very good at this. Xiaomi phone, Xiaomi speaker, Xiaomi washing machine. Now there's a Xiaomi car, Xiaomi home, Xiaomi office. All of those, like 150 items, they all sync beautifully. Like there's an ecosystem play here on the consumer side where you don't necessarily win by having the best tech, which they don't. You have it by having the ecosystem. And there's a similar idea on the industrial side. If you get like a lot of China focus on AI, especially Baidu, which is nobody talks about Baidu enough. They've been focused on industrial use cases and specifically manufacturing from day one. And they're building an ecosystem where they're deploying into factories robots, drones, sensors, cameras to feed the AI, which is being trained on industry use cases and data. And they're building this across transportation, manufacturing. They're building these sort of B2B ecosystems in AI, which has a big robotic component. That's really powerful. And the key issue is not necessarily how good is your model versus your model. It's how much adoption do you have? Because
Which
if
is what
you've got a
Apple seems to
massive
be
amount of
doing.
factories using this, that's how you win.
Which many would now argue is what Apple's play has kind of been. Like, let's focus on the hardware and the ecosystem, and then not spend all this money building foundation models and on inference tokens, right?
Yeah, I don't buy them at all. Where's your model? Where's your car? Where's anything that's been built in the last 10 years besides earbuds? Like, the amount of innovation coming out of Apple over the last 10 years has been kind of, they're very good commercial. Their business strategy is very, very good, right? The market cap went up like crazy and the revenue went up like crazy. But when's the last time we saw a great product out of Apple?
Okay, but
Steve Jobs?
everybody has an iPhone. After OpenClaw launched, now Mac Minis are just all over the place. Half of this AI hardware will only run on an Apple phone before it'll run on Windows. Like I thought they were going to be a blockbuster. A year ago, I thought they're going to be gone. They're not keeping up. I think they're leaning into offering the hardware that everyone wants to run this stuff on and not spending trillions of dollars building the AI technology, but using more of like a Perplexity style business model.
I think they control distribution into people's pockets, and that puts them in a strong position. And I think their business strategy is very good. I'm just saying their ability to create products, I don't see it. I haven't
Yeah.
seen it in a long, long time. And, I think they're at major risk for being disrupted. If I've got really good agents that I can talk to in a messenger or by an earpiece, or even why do I need an operating system and apps? I don't need any of that anymore. The user interface, which is where Apple lives and dies, is being changed, maybe. They should have viewed this like Google viewed this. This is a potential mortal threat to us, right? Search engines had a major disruption, or at least a major alternative created. I think these agent-based systems without operating systems, I think it's a major risk to them. I mean, they should have hit the panic button. That's just a bias, but I just think I think
Well,
if
you
they get a
are
technologist in charge of that company, you know who should do it is Lei Jun of Xiaomi. That guy's unbelievable. I mean, they launch products like crazy. That guy went from, I think maybe we should get into cars in 2020 to being one of the biggest automakers in China in 4 years. Like that's an ability to execute in a totally new space. Um, I don't
I
see, yeah,
I don't disagree with you, but I'm also close to the same age as you, and I would take Jarvis over my iPhone any day. However, I've talked to a lot of 20-year-olds who say that that iPhone, that tablet is Linus's blanket to them. That it is they you won't be able to pry that out of their dead hand because anytime they're bored or nervous or whatever, they can turn to their screen and hyper focus on that and disengage from the rest of the world, and that we
yeah,
have built a huge consumer base that's dependent on that.
yeah. I mean, that's a business strategy based on a product Steve Jobs created.
Yeah.
Okay, that's important, but and it's obviously arguably the most successful product ever created. But you know, just monetizing that and using that as a position is not the same as creating. You know, Steve Jobs, he created how many products? The Mac, the iPod, the iPad, the iPhone. I mean, he was rolling these things out every 18 months. And then it's just been silent. Now, fortunately, they got the world's greatest product in their portfolio. But where's the car?
Yeah.
Where's anything? Xiaomi rolls out new products I mean, actually, if you actually want to see a really great phone, look at the Huawei phones. The handsets, I mean, the iPhone it's sad. It's a sad little phone from 2014, the handset. Now, the ecosystem's great, but the handset is primitive compared to what you can get at Huawei. Like, their phones are amazing. So it's like, I just don't think they innovate. I think they're very good business people and not technologists. But I don't know them, so maybe but yeah, I don't see the innovation coming out of Apple.
Well, I have
Um,
two quick ones before because I know you and I have to wrap up. But two things I'd love to run by you, which is I think Demis and the Google DeepMind team, like what they're doing with drug discovery, is going to disrupt Eli Lilly and all these huge people.
that's a
Like I
big
think
deal.
that's where we may have what China has in manufacturing, we may have in drug discovery. And then the flip side is I'd like really quickly get your thoughts on the Chinese company that tried to fold into Facebook that the Chinese government blocked and how that's been received.
Oh, Manus.
Yes.
Yeah. No, one of the things I really is I almost look at civilization as we do really well with things up to a certain level of intelligence. We can open stores forever quickly, but really difficult things like discovering new drugs and creating new technologies and figuring out the physics of the universe, it's actually a very small number of people that can do that. We don't have the volume of brain power on those things. And we're capped out. People who do drug discovery, they got 130, 150 IQ. One, there's not that many of them. You're in the top 2%, and we only have so many humans. What if AI can go up to 500 IQ?
Yeah.
What if AI can go up to 500 IQ at scale? Like, are we going to be getting new drugs every day? Well, you got to test them, of course. But like, what happens if we blow through the limit of human intelligence? What does that mean for discovering new drugs and solving problems and doing physics and mathematics? Like, we really do have sort of pushed up against that hard limit for hundreds of years. It's like we're all getting around town by running. And we can only get so much done because we can only run so fast. And then someone invents the car, right? That's kind of how I think about it. Like, there's a good analogy to be made. Like, the world used to be defined by the limits of our physical abilities. How much can we lift? How fast can we run? How far can we swim? Even with a horse or a little boat, you can't bend steel. You can't build skyscrapers. And then the limits on our physical bodies got wiped out by machinery and the steam engine. Now we can bend steel and make skyscrapers and, try to run against a car, see who wins. Try to swim against a boat, see who wins. you could argue the same thing is happening to our brains, which is just another part of our body that the limits. I think there was a book written about this called like the second machine age, that like big aspects of society are going to be rewritten by the fact that we're going to blow past the limitations of our brains, just like we blew past the limitations of our physical bodies. And when that happens, could be now, could be this year.
Yeah.
You know, these systems we're talking about, drug discovery, mathematics, physics, it's kind of like coding. It's a very rules-based world.
Very
Like,
true.
I mean, these AI agents are doing math problems like crazy because math is very logical. Like, we may blow past in the areas of like we may not be able to make people happy. Like that's a fuzzy problem, but
Sure.
maybe these things are incredibly good at designing new proteins like next year.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of stunned by that. I'm super optimistic, um, but we'll see. Yeah, that's such a good book. The second, it's a bit old. It wasn't written about AI. It was written about just digital, like 10 years ago. Um, I think a guy at Stanford wrote it. Eric Bridenhoff, something like that. Anyways, your other question was Manus. Yeah, Manus was. They won't say they're a Chinese company, but they were a Chinese company that then, they got a lot of traction on sort of agent-based stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I shouldn't say track. They got a lot of publicity.
Yeah.
I was never sure how much traction they were getting. They were definitely getting a lot of word of mouth. And then, they sort of became a Singapore company, legally or in some form, or I don't know what. And then Facebook bought them. And like, if you couldn't see this one coming, you, obviously Beijing was going to stop this. I would have bet money. Like, but they did the deal, and then they started to. Now they got to unwind it or something. No, there's already rules on the books in China that when like TikTok was, trying to be sort of taken over by the U.S., expropriated. The government of Beijing or China came out and basically said, we consider AI to be, property, and there's national security, and it needs approval. And so it's pretty clear that as long as Manus was considered a Chinese company, that they were going to have an issue with this, and they were also going to have an issue with the fact that you didn't ask for permission. Um, Now, so yeah, that was pretty predictable. I don't know. I mean, I use like, OpenClaw, everyone's using, everyone in China is talking about QClaw, which is the new 10-cent version of OpenClaw. I mean, that thing is everywhere. Um, but Manus shows up on the boards, so I'm not really sure what that means, but yeah, that was pretty predictable. This stuff is political ground.
Yeah.
It's not political, which is funny. Like like you're not going to have ChatGPT in China because you're curating information. Well, China does not like non-China companies to curate Chinese information, which I actually think is very smart. I'm sort of what you call an info-nationalist. I think the people of Indonesia, when they write online about what's going on in their country, journalists, commentators, politicians, that should not be curated and approved or disapproved by a bunch of people sitting in Palo Alto
Yeah.
based on their values and their standards. No, this is their own culture, their own. So you can host the data architecture there, but all the information decisions should be local. Indonesians should decide what is acceptable and not acceptable in Indonesia, not a bunch of pretty far left people in Palo Alto. And so I thought China was always correct that we should not have YouTube in China. We should not have Facebook in China. We should have our own, and we will decide as a society, whatever that means, top down, bottom up, what is acceptable, what is not, what is prioritized, what is not, what values we want to support, what values we don't tolerate. There's not a lot of sinful sort of porn stuff on any of these platforms in China. They don't like that. It's very family promoting.
Well, that
Um,
makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you look at the westernization of Japan in the 1970s, late 70s and early 80s, there was a lot of Japanese nationalists who would say that the Western ethics and entertainment that came into Japan did not do anything good for their
no,
culture.
I don't view Hollywood. I watch Hollywood, so I'm not saying I don't. I don't view it as a positive thing in this world. Like, I think the stories are good and I think they're entertaining, But in terms of values and all of that, I don't like it. I don't think it's healthy. Now, some of it's good, obviously, but it's hard to, a lot of it's horrible. Um, OnlyFans. What percentage of American women are on OnlyFans?
That's
8%?
yeah.
You know that I looked this up, an American woman under 30 is more likely to do OnlyFans and get a STEM degree. Like, how
That's
is
a
that
sad
good?
statistic.
Right. So, anyways, I like the idea of info-nationalism, that everyone should, curate their own. And ironically, that's what the US eventually did by saying TikTok needs to be localized to the US,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
what China did to YouTube, like, 15 years ago. So everyone's sort of coming to the same conclusion of, how do you do that? So Manus falls in that category because AI, like videos or whatever, is a form of information control, curation. You could argue it's a form of reality control, maybe. And agents are just a more active version of that. So, um, that was always going to be politically sensitive ground. Now, if you want to do Kling, Kling AI, which is video generation, that's Kuaishou, that's Chinese. That's fine. I mean, it's not political at all. You can create whatever content you want. It's just a tool. So some of these tools can cross borders like it's nothing, and there's no political dimension. But others, like pure AI, LLMs, agents, yeah, you're pretty much on political ground. Um, like news shows in China from the West are usually they need approval. But you can watch the NBA all day long. Sports is fine. It's not
Yeah.
political. So everyone watches the NBA, there's nothing. But if you're going to do a news broadcast, oh no, you need a license. It's the same kind of dynamic with AI. You can see certain ground is like, dude, you're clearly on political ground. Did you really think this acquisition was going to go through Facebook and just start doing the integration? And you didn't go for, come on. Now, maybe they did apply, but I don't know if they actually applied or not, but it was pretty obvious. I would have bet money it was going to get shot down. Um,
What an
so
awesome conversation, man. And the Tech Strategy Podcast, I cannot recommend it enough. If people wanna know what's going on in China, I could talk to you all day, but I have to finish with the one question, the fun question I ask all my guests, which is 5, 10 years from now, if one sci-fi movie had it right, where are we headed?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, the first thing that came to mind was Gattaca, but I don't know the genetic world well enough to know if that's actually true or not. So I won't say Gattaca. Um, you said Blade Runner.
Yeah, that's my bet, at least for a while.
I think if you dial back the dystopian aspect of Blade Runner, like the dark, cityscape, like when they're on the streets in Blade Runner, that strikes me as accurate, right? I buy that. Holograms, food everywhere, it's, everyone like the whole bit about getting a pet and you can get a reptile, a fake winner. I get that. And then if you sort of contrast that with, that's if I had to guess cities, not nature, not countryside, but cities, like a sunnier version of Blade Runner would probably be where I'd go. But I mean, I kind of just thought of that because you mentioned it. Um,
Yeah,
Definitely not
I think
Star
it's a good
Wars. Definitely not Star Trek. No way. Um,
No, not yet anyway. I think to me, Blade Runner is kind of Sinclair's jungle. Like it's the dystopia that happens, the downside to a major shift that we'll have to at least get through to get to a more utopian possible future.
You know what I think about a lot sometimes? I'm sorry, not a lot. If you want to listen to my podcast, like I talk about tech companies, here
Yep.
I'm all over the map, right? I'm just um what was I gonna say? I think about the fact that we view living as getting up, going to work, have a job, live in a city, pay our taxes, build a house. That's not how human beings used to live 300 years ago. We all lived on farms, mostly. Couple cities here and there, but not too many, and we all spend our days farming. The idea of a 9 to 5 job is kind of a new thing. And the idea, because we all had to move into the cities, that's where the jobs were, that's where the factory was, everyone goes 9 to 5. It may be that this little 2 or 300-year history of we all get up and go to work every day and commute and have a 9 to 5 job and live in cities. This might be an aberration. It may be going back to what it used to be. People lived on farms and in little villages and, not in cities. And we made enough just to survive, and that was enough. Like maybe that's normal for us. And this is going to be the weird time looking back.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I wonder about that. I'm like, if you ever look at how people lived, like, what's really interesting about how people lived is like, there was no lights. So once the sun went down, everything kind of stopped.
Yeah.
Like you were only active during the daylight hours, and then the rest, like that was a weird way to, but that's how human beings have lived for the last 200,000 years. So this whole little, live in a city, have lights, go to work, career, pension, all that. Maybe this is just a little detour. So I think things are probably going to be very different, but I don't know.
I can't. I'm excited to be alive right now. I'll tell you that. It is an exciting time.
It's I think it's exciting. I also sort of accept that for other people who don't live in this stuff, it must be very nerve-wracking,
Yeah.
because all they do is they hear it. They don't understand it. They had a job, now they don't have a job. Like the disruption can be very difficult, fearful if you don't understand it. So I think there's going to be a lot of sort of people with a lot of fear and uncertainty, and I'm sympathetic to them, especially if they're being disrupted. Like, yeah, we don't need your job anymore. You and I, we think it's interesting, and if we get disrupted, we'll move. We know what to do.
Yeah.
But most people, that's I'm 50-50. I'm excited, and I'm sort of very sympathetic people who are struggling with this. So.
And that's amen. And knowledge is power. So if you want to really know what's going on with Chinese technology, check out Jeff's work and his podcast. It's all those links will be in the show notes. I cannot thank you enough for taking this hour and a half to talk to me today, Jeff.
Cool. Appreciate it. Anytime.
All right.